One of my absolute favorite drills to use with the Hack Motion wrist sensor is the motorcycle drill. In this video, I'll share with you exactly what the motorcycle drill is, how to do it, why it helped you, and encourage you to try it yourself as it's incorporated into the Hack Motion app. So the motorcycle drill refers to a twisting of this grip and a twisting of this club in a similar fashion to how you would twist the throttle on a motorcycle. And if you're not familiar with how that twisting affects the club face, I want to just quickly share with you using this magnetic tool. I'm going to stick to the club face here, this 7-iron that I have, just to show you the influence that the twisting of the wrists has on the club face. If you're not familiar with this yet, this will be an incredibly important lesson for you to learn. At Hack Motion, we've discovered that most poor golfers, higher handicap golfers in fact, have too much lead wrist extension at the top of the swing. The extension is the description here of this cupping of the wrist. And if I was to twist my wrist into that condition, you'll notice how the club face and the rod that's sticking out of the club face points very much up to the sky. If I continued that up to the top of the swing, this would have the club face in a very open condition. You can see that extension there, 34 degrees of extension in my lead wrist. And that leads to a number of problems in the downswing that amateur golfers need to try to fix. You typically fix it by trying to swing over the top. That somewhat helps to square up the club face, but also you need to tend to flip and throw the wrist angles out early, which from this front view you'll see how the club head's overtaken my hands and I'm flipping at the ball. My weight's too far back and I'm likely going to hit behind the ball. If I do make good contact, I'm still going to add lots of loft to this 7-iron. You see how high that rod is pointing into the air. So I've taken this 7-iron and I've really turned it into a 9-iron. So even if I get away with the contact, I'm losing distance. The better players don't have the extension I just described. They have a more flexed lead wrist. That would be a flatter or slightly bowed wrist. And you'll see that as I move my wrist towards flexion, you'll see the effect that that has on the club face and ultimately the rod that's sticking out from the club face. That's pointing more down towards the ground. This position would be more in line with how better golfers do it. And as they swing down, there's no need to make all of those compensations I just described. In fact, this allows me to deliver the club in an extremely efficient, powerful way. I have shaft lean at impact. That means I can compress the ball very nicely. And you'll notice there that the rod is much lower because the dynamic loft, the amount of loft I'm delivering at impact, is much lower than it was in the previous example. So this 7-iron is as strong as a 6-iron now. I'm going to get extra ball speed and ultimately extra distance. So there's no doubt that controlling your wrist angles matters. Most of you don't realize you're twisting this club when you swing, and therefore you just continue to make a swing that's very familiar to you. But I promise you, you're twisting this thing throughout the entire swing, and if you struggle with slicing the balls or loss of distance, then you're likely getting the wrist angle equation wrong. I'm going to hit one now and show you how the extension at the top of the swing leads to an open club face and mostly a sliced shot. So I've removed the rod from the club face, but I'm still going to move this wrist incorrectly into this extended condition. This motorcycle drill encourages you to twist the club in the fashion that I described, like a good player, where you twist the face down. Doing the motorcycle drill and twisting the club the wrong way would have you opening the club face and causing more problems. Let me go and hit one of those and you'll see what I mean. So you'll notice on the Hack Motion sensor I was too extended at the top of the swing there. It meant I had the wrist in too much extension. And you'll see the resulting shot was a slice off to the right. That's pretty consistent with what I would expect to see with players who extend the wrist too much at the top. I managed to get the wrist somewhere back towards a decent condition at impact, but it wasn't enough to save this shot. An overly extended wrist at the top of the swing is the #1 mistake I see in amateur golfers. Learning to twist this club or twist this grip in the correct fashion to get the club face lined up correctly will allow you to deliver this club in a far more consistent, repeatable and powerful fashion. So then very specifically, this motorcycle drill is a twist of the lead wrist away from you, moving the throttle of the motorcycle as if you were actually deaccelerating the motorcycle. Please don't misunderstand that this is supposed to be a twisting of the throttle in this direction where you're speeding up the motorbike. Let's think about slowing the motorbike down as you move that lead wrist in the backswing, But ultimately, the most important point in the swing where this needs to happen is during transition. We've seen at Hack Motion that the best players from the top of the backswing to where the shaft is parallel to the ground, this position is called P6, move the wrist towards flexion. That's an important statement that I'll say one more time. The best golfers from the top of their backswing move their lead wrist towards flexion. That's really where this drill came from, this motorcycle drill, this twist of twisting the grip. For many of you, this will be very conscious, twisting the grip in a way that starts to flex the lead wrist and close the club face. If we take a look at the Hack Motion wrist sensor there at the top of the swing, I've got the wrist in 7, 8, 9 degrees of flex. It's more or less flat. But as I move it down to P6 and I stop where the shaft's parallel to the ground, you'll see how that flex number has increased to 18. That's an increase of around 10 degrees. That's a twist that I'm placing on the grip as I swing down. As I've already said, many of you won't be conscious at the moment of any twisting happening in your swing. And if you struggle with your wrist angles, then this change that I'm suggesting could well feel very different and maybe even awkward. I just want to reiterate one more time how this twisting is with the lead wrist down into flexion, or if you prefer, you can take your trail wrist and move that towards extension. As the lead wrist moves towards flexion, the trail wrist is going to move more towards extension and have that angle in the back of it. That's another key angle that you would see associated with good ball strikers. I wanted to share that with you because not everybody feels this so well in one wrist or the other. Some golfers I work with are more sensitive in their lead hand or their trail hand. And it really doesn't matter which hand you prefer to feel this with, just as long as you're feeling the correct movement. So moving the wrist, twisting the club down. Notice how the club face is looking slightly down to the ground. That would be a good checkpoint. If you don't have the magnetic rod that I was using earlier to show you, you could just take a look at your club face here and note that it's pointed slightly down towards the ground. So as you continue working this drill, I'd go from the top of the backswing down to P6 and just keep getting a sense of that twist. I'm looking at the live numbers there on the Hack Motion, and I can see that from the top where my wrist is more or less flat towards P6, I'm just twisting enough to get a sense of moving that wrist towards flexion. This would be a nice little pump drill that you could practice. And then once you've got a sense of what that's like, you could go ahead and hit one. When I put that sort of twist into the grip, it makes me draw the balls too much. You'll see that ball going too far. You'll see at the top of my backswing there on the Hack Motion, I'd actually overflex the wrist this time. This movement isn't something I'd need to practice. My ball flight typically is more of a draw shape anyway. So when I add in this extra twisting that I'm just describing, it actually closes my club face too much. And there's a great final lesson to learn from this drill. The motorcycle drill is a drill that you can use over time and adapt it based on your ball flight. If your balls start curving too much to the left, the likelihood is you've put too much of this flex into the wrist, you've closed the club face too much, and your balls start to end up left of target. Equally, if you're slicing the ball still and seeing the balls drift off to the right, that's an indication that you haven't put enough of this twist in just yet. Ultimately, the ball is the judge. The ball is going to give you the feedback as to whether you did enough of this or not. So use the ball flight combined with the Hack Motion wrist sensor data, and use the Hack Motion motorcycle drill, which is inside the Hack Motion app, to help you pull all of these feels and pieces together and start hitting the best shots of your life. I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, and you're looking to learn more about how to use the Hack Motion and train your wrists, you can click the link that's in the description of this video, which will take you to more Hack Motion wrist training videos.